The rain-slicked streets of Dusthaven gleamed under the sodium glow of flickering streetlights, a forgotten corner of the city where the air hung heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and distant exhaust. It was just past midnight when the door to the Iron Oath Motorcycle Club creaked open, letting in a gust of chill wind that carried the faint, acrid tang of urban decay. Inside, the clubhouse was a haze of cigarette smoke and low murmurs, the kind of place where leather creaked against scarred wooden benches and the jukebox hummed forgotten rock anthems. The bikers, hardened men with tattoos mapping out old battles and lost brothers, lounged around pool tables and half-empty beer bottles, their eyes lifting only briefly at the intrusion. No one expected what stumbled through that door. A boy, no more than 11, his frame swallowed by an oversized hoodie that might have once belonged to a father or an uncle, now frayed at the cuffs and stained with mud. His sneakers dragged across the threshold, leaving wet tracks on the scuffed floorboards. Theo Quinn's face was a map of exhaustion, hollow cheeks smudged with grime. Dark eyes wide, but not with fear, more like a cornered animal sizing up the room. He clutched a battered backpack slung over one shoulder, the zipper half undone, revealing glimpses of crumpled clothes and a rusted toolkit peeking out. The room fell silent, the clack of pool balls freezing mid-shot. Big Earl, the club's enforcer with arms like tree trunks, straightened up from his stool, his brow furrowing under the brim of his faded cap. "What the hell is this?" Earl growled, his voice a low rumble that echoed off the walls lined with framed photos of rides long past. Convoy lines stretching into sunsets, brothers raising fists in silent vows. The other bikers exchanged glances, a ripple of unease cutting through the camaraderie. Kids didn't wander into places like this. Not alone. Not at this hour. Theo didn't flinch. He scanned the room with a mechanic's eye, his gaze landing on the far wall where a row of Harleys sat in various states of repair. One in particular caught his attention. A sleek black chopper with a busted carburetor, its chrome dulled by neglect, tools scattered around it like the remnants of a half-hearted fix. Ignoring the stares, Theo shuffled forward, his small hands flexing at his sides as if already itching to work. He stopped a few feet from the bike, tilting his head to study the engine. The clubhouse air thickened, the scent of motor oil mingling with the boy's faint, underlying smell of street rain and survival. Darius Patch Monroe, the club's president, leaned back in his chair at the head of the scarred oak table, his salt and pepper beard twitching with a mix of amusement and suspicion. Patch was a man who'd seen too many sunrises over desert horizons, his own scars hidden under a vest, patched with the emblems of promises kept and broken. He'd lost a brother in a ride gone wrong years back, a debt that still whispered in his dreams. "Kid," he said, his voice gravelly from years of wind and whiskey, "this ain't no soup kitchen. You lost?" Theo turned, his eyes meeting Patch's without a blink. There was no plea in them, no quiver of the lip that begged for pity, just a steady resolve that seemed too old for his years. "I can fix your bike," he said, his voice clear and unyielding, pointing a grease-streaked finger at the chopper. "The one over there, carbs flooding, valves sticking. I know how to clean it. Will you give me a job?" The words hung in the air like exhaust fumes, simple and bold. A chuckle rippled from the back, Earl crossing his massive arms, but Patch held up a hand, silencing the room. He rose slowly, his boots thudding against the floor as he approached, towering over the boy like a shadow at dusk. The bikers watched, the jukebox clicking to a halt mid-chorus. Outside, thunder rumbled low, vibrating through the walls, as if the storm itself held its breath. Patch crouched down to Theo's level, the lines around his eyes deepening. "A job? You think you can just walk in here and wrench on my ride?" He glanced at the bike, remembering the frustration of his last attempt, a stalled engine that mocked his efforts after a long haul from the border. Theo nodded, unzipping his backpack to pull out a small wrench, its handle worn smooth from use. "Watch," he said, stepping past Patch toward the Harley. The room leaned in, the air electric with curiosity. With hands that moved like they'd been born in an auto shop, Theo knelt beside the bike, his fingers deftly unbolting the air filter. The metallic clink echoed sharply, cutting through the tension. He probed the carburetor, his touch precise, wiping away gunk with a rag from his pack that smelled of oil and faint desperation. Minutes ticked by in silence, broken only by the patter of rain against the tin roof. Patch's eyes narrowed as the engine sputtered to life under Theo's adjustments, a low, throaty roar that filled the clubhouse like a waking beast. The boy straightened, wiping his hands on his hoodie, the machine purring steadily now, its chrome catching the dim light in a fresh gleam. Earl whistled low, the sound pulling nods from the others. "How the hell?" But Patch wasn't laughing anymore. He studied Theo, seeing not just skill but something deeper, a flicker of the same haunted determination that had drawn him to the club decades ago after the war chewed up his youth and spat him out. "Where'd you learn that, kid?" Patch asked, his tone softer now, the edge of command giving way to something paternal. Unbidden, Theo's gaze dropped to the floor, his small frame tensing, the rain outside intensified, drumming like impatient fingers. "My dad," he murmured, the words barely audible over the engine's idle. "He fixed bikes, taught me before he couldn't." There was a pause, heavy as lead, the unspoken weight of loss settling over the room. Patch exchanged a look with his vice, Jax, a wiry vet with a limp from an old explosion. The club had its codes, promises etched in ink and blood, loyalty forged in the fire of shared roads. This boy with his toolkit and his quiet defiance had just walked into their world offering more than a fix. He was asking for a place, a purpose. But as the night wore on, with Theo perched on a stool nursing a soda while the bikers grilled him gently, questions about the streets, the shelters he'd dodged, cracks began to show. Theo's answers were clipped, his eyes darting to shadows that weren't there. "Shelters take kids," he said finally, voice flat. "Separate 'em. I stay out. Fix what I can. Sleep where it's dry." Patch felt a stir in his chest, an old promise resurfacing, the vow he'd made to his fallen brother to watch for the lost ones, the strays who reminded him of home. The clubhouse felt smaller now, the air charged with possibility. This wasn't just a kid with a wrench. It was a spark, a call to something bigger than their nightly rides. By dawn's first light filtering through grimy windows, the decision hung unspoken, but inevitable. Patch clapped a hand on Theo's shoulder, the gesture light but firm. "All right, kid, you fixed the bike. Now let's see about that job." Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle, the world washing clean as the Iron Oath prepared to ride into uncharted territory. A boy's trust, a club's honor, and the quiet redemption that binds the broken. The first rays of dawn sliced through the clubhouse windows like hesitant blades, painting the scarred wooden beams in hues of gold and grey. The Iron Oath Motorcycle Club stirred slowly, the low rumble of engines outside mingling with the scent of fresh coffee brewing on the hot plate. Theo Quinn sat on a stool at the edge of the room, his small frame dwarfed by the massive figures around him. But his eyes, sharp and unyielding, tracked every movement. Patch had kept his word. The boy hadn't been turned away. Instead, he'd been given a corner cot in the back room, a blanket that smelled faintly of leather and road dust, and a plate of eggs scrambled over a portable stove. It wasn't home, but it was shelter, and for Theo, that was a line he hadn't crossed in months. Jax, the vice president, leaned against the workbench, his limp more pronounced in the cool morning air as he nursed a mug of black coffee. The vet's face was a roadmap of shrapnel scars, reminders of a desert war that had taken more than limbs. He watched Theo with a mix of curiosity and caution, the way one eyes a stray dog that's shown up at the door, wary, but unable to ignore the plea in its stance. "You got a last name, kid?" Jax asked, his voice rough but not unkind, the steam from his mug curling like smoke signals. "Quinn," Theo replied without looking up, methodically polishing a set of wrenches from his backpack. His hands moved with the precision of ritual, each tool gleaming under the light as if it were an extension of himself. The clubhouse hummed with subdued activity. Big Earl wiping down his Harley with a chamois cloth, the soft squeak echoing like a whisper. Others nursing hangovers or checking tire pressure, their vests emblazoned with the club's emblem. An iron fist clasped around a broken chain, symbol of oaths unbreakable. Patch emerged from the office, his boots heavy on the floorboards, carrying a rolled-up map under one arm. He'd spent the night thinking, the boy's words echoing like an old engine knock. Before he couldn't. Those syllables carried the weight of ghosts, stirring memories of his own father, a mechanic who'd patched tanks in the war before a factory collapse claimed him. Patch had run then, wild and lost, until the Brotherhood of the Road pulled him in. Now, staring at Theo, he saw a mirror, fractured but reflecting the same fire. "All right, Quinn," Patch said, pulling up a chair that creaked under his weight. "You fixed my ride, earned a spot for now, but this club's no daycare. You pull your weight, you eat, you learn our ways, or you walk." Theo nodded, his dark hair falling over his forehead like a curtain he didn't bother to push away. There was no gratitude in his expression, just acceptance, as if he'd bartered for this moment 100 times in his mind. The rain from the night before had left puddles outside, reflecting the club's Harleys like silver spectres. As the morning unfolded, Theo proved his worth beyond the carburetor. He spotted a loose chain on Earl's bike, tightening it with a flick of his wrist that drew a grunt of approval from the big man. "Kid's got eyes like a hawk," Earl muttered, clapping Theo on the back hard enough to nearly topple him. But the boy steadied himself, a faint smile ghosting his lips, the first crack in his armor. By mid-morning, the club gathered around the oak table for their ritual briefing. The air thick with the aroma of tobacco and machine oil. Patch unrolled the map, tracing routes with a calloused finger. Supply runs to the outskirts. A charity ride for the local shelter that the club supported in quiet defiance of the city's corrupt officials. But Theo's presence shifted the dynamic, an unspoken question hanging like exhaust. "He's staying," Patch declared, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "For now, but we need to know why he's really here. Streets don't teach carburetor tricks without a story." Theo shifted in his seat, the wooden chair groaning softly. The room's eyes turned to him, a circle of leather and ink, faces weathered by sun and sorrow. He hesitated, fingers tracing the edge of his toolkit, the metal cool against his skin. Outside, a flock of crows scattered from the fence, their cries sharp against the distant hum of traffic. "Dad was Iron Oath," Theo said finally, the words tumbling out like loosened bolts. "Not this chapter, but down south, taught me everything. Engines, roads, keeping your word. Then trouble came. Men in suits saying he owed money, but it was lies. They took him one night. Mom tried to fight, but she got sick after. Now she's gone too. I've been fixing what I can, staying hidden. Shelters ask questions, and those men, they find kids." The confession landed like a dropped wrench, clanging in the silence. Jax's mug paused midway to his lips, his jaw tightening at the mention of men in suits, a phrase that evoked the club's old enemies. Corrupt developers who'd muscled into biker territories years back, breaking promises with bribes and badges. Patch leaned forward, the map forgotten, his eyes locking onto Theo's. A promise flickered in that gaze, ancient and binding, the kind forged in the crucible of loss. His own brother had vanished in a setup like that, body never found, just whispers of foul play. "Those men," Patch said slowly. "You got names? Faces?" Theo shook his head, but his voice steadied. "Just know the club's logo on Dad's vest. Iron Oath. Figured if I found one, maybe. Answers." The room absorbed it, the weight settling like dust after a ride. This wasn't charity anymore, it was reckoning. Earl cracked his knuckles, the sound like gravel under tires, while Jax nodded, a silent vow passing between them. The boy wasn't just a stray, he was blood, tied by ink and oath, a thread pulling the club toward a shadowed past. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the lot, Patch stood, signaling the end of the talk. "We ride today. Supply drop at the warehouse district. Theo, you stick with Jax. Learn the routes." The boy rose, backpack slung over his shoulder, stepping into the light outside, where engines roared to life one by one. The convoy formed, a thunderous line of chrome and resolve. Theo perched on the back of Jax's bike, wind whipping his hoodie like a flag of defiance. They rolled out of Dusthaven, the city blurring into open road, the horizon promising not just miles, but justice, a moral debt coming due, binding a lost boy to a family reborn in loyalty's fire. The engines faded into the distance, but the clubhouse echoed with their absence, a quiet charged with purpose. Patch lingered by the door, watching the dust trail rise, an old promise stirring in his chest, to protect the vulnerable, to honor the fallen. Theo had walked in asking for a job. Now, the Iron Oath was riding for redemption. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The sun hung high over the warehouse district, a relentless orb baking the cracked asphalt into shimmering waves of heat. The Iron Oath convoy thundered to a halt in a gravel lot edged by rusted chain-link fences and towering stacks of shipping containers, their metallic surfaces scarred by years of neglect and graffiti. Dust swirled in the wake of the bikes, settling like a fine powder on the rider's leathers and the boy's hoodie. Theo clung to the back of Jax's Harley, his knuckles white against the worn grips. The wind's roar still echoing in his ears as the engines cut to a low growl. The air carried the sharp tang of salt from the nearby docks, mingled with the oily residue of idling trucks and the faint, briny rot of the river. Jax killed the ignition, his boot thudding against the ground as he swung his leg over. He glanced back at Theo, the boy's face flushed from the ride, eyes wide with the thrill of motion he'd chased in stolen moments on the streets. "First convoy?" Jax asked, his voice gravelly over the settling quiet, offering a hand to help the kid dismount. Theo nodded, sliding off with a grace that belied his small size, his sneakers crunching on the pebbles. The other bikers dismounted in a symphony of creaks and clanks, leather shifting, holsters settling, vests emblazoned with the iron fist emblem catching the light like badges of unyielding resolve. Big Earl lumbered over, wiping sweat from his brow with a bandana that smelled of sweat and gun oil, his massive frame casting a shadow over Theo. "Stick close, kid," Earl rumbled, clapping a hand on Theo's shoulder with enough force to steady him. "This ain't a playground. Warehouse runs mean eyes everywhere." The group moved toward the main building, a hulking structure of corrugated steel that loomed like a forgotten giant, its doors yawning open to reveal dim interiors stacked with crates of supplies. Canned goods for the shelter, tools for community fixes, all part of the club's quiet rebellion against the city's underbelly. Patch led the way, his stride purposeful, the rolled map now tucked into his belt like a talisman. He'd chosen this run deliberately, a chance to test Theo's mettle, to see if the boy's story held under pressure, and to scout for whispers of those men in suits who'd haunted his own past. Inside, the air cooled to a musty chill, lit by harsh fluorescence that buzzed like angry hornets overhead. Forklifts hummed in the distance, their operators nodding curtly to the bikers, old allies in the shadow economy, men who'd bent rules but never broken oaths. Theo stayed at Jax's side, his backpack slung low, fingers twitching as if ready to wrench something loose. The vice president handed him a clipboard, its edges frayed from use. "Inventory check," Jack said, his limp echoing softly as they navigated aisles of pallets. "You got the eyes for it. Spot anything off, you call it." Theo took the board, his small hands steady, scanning the labels with a focus that silenced any doubts. He marked off boxes methodically, the pencil scratching like a whisper, uncovering a discrepancy almost immediately. A crate short on medical kits, the seal tampered. "Here," Theo said, pointing to the gap on the shelf, his voice cutting through the warehouse din. Jax knelt, prying the edge with a pocket knife, revealing not emptiness, but a hidden compartment stuffed with unmarked envelopes. Cash, thick stacks that reeked of grease and secrecy. The discovery hung in the air like exhaust, Jax's face hardening as he pocketed a sample, his shrapnel scars pulling tight. "Not ours," he muttered, eyes flicking to the shadows, where two club prospects stood guard. Word spread fast. Patch appeared at the aisle's end, his expression a storm cloud, the map forgotten in his fist. Back outside, under the blistering sun, the group huddled by the bikes, the envelopes passed hand to hand like contraband evidence. The river lapped lazily against the docks, a rhythmic counterpoint to the rising tension. Theo stood at the edge, his gaze fixed on the water, the reflections dancing like fractured memories. Patch crouched before him, the president's knees cracking like distant thunder. "This what you meant by trouble?" he asked, voice low, the envelope's weight implied in every syllable. Theo's jaw tightened, the boy's resolve cracking just enough to reveal the fear beneath, a flicker of the street's cruelty, the knights huddled in alleys listening for footsteps. "Not exactly," Theo admitted, his words measured, the clipboard clutched like a shield. "But close. Dad said the suits launder through places like this, steal from the good runs, pin it on clubs like yours. He fought it once, fixed a whole convoy sabotage. That's why they came for him, night after a big drop like this one." The confession rippled through the group, Earl's fists clenching, the big man's breath coming in heavy gusts. Jax leaned against his bike, the limp forgotten in the surge of old rage. He'd lost a patrol partner to similar setups, a brother framed and vanished into the system's maw. The envelopes weren't just cash. They were threads to a web, pulling at the Iron Oath's fringes, threatening the moral code that bound them. Patch rose slowly, his eyes scanning the horizon where the city skyline pierced the haze, a silhouette of corruption masked as progress. An old promise burned in his chest, one sworn over a brother's grave, to root out the liars, to shield the innocent with the weight of unbreakable loyalty. "We ride back, dig deeper," he declared, his voice carrying like an engine rev. "Theo, you're in this now. Your dad's oath is ours." The boy met his gaze, a spark igniting in those dark eyes. Not fear, but belonging, the first taste of family forged in fire. As the convoy reformed, engines snarling to life in a chorus of defiance, Theo climbed back onto Jax's bike, the wind rising like an ally. They peeled out, gravel spitting under tires, the warehouse shrinking in the side mirror, a den of shadows they'd return to, not with fists, but with truth's unyielding blade. The road stretched ahead, baking under the sun, carrying them toward revelations that would test every bond. In the rear view, Patch watched Theo's small form steady against the rush, a silent vow sealing the path. Redemption wasn't given, it was ridden, mile by scarred mile, for the lost and the loyal. The dust trail rose high, a banner of resolve against the afternoon sky, as the Iron Oath thundered homeward, the boys' secret weaving tighter into their unbreakable chain. The clubhouse door slammed shut behind the convoy, the echo reverberating like a final punctuation to the day's thunder. Dust from the road clung to everything. The biker's leathers, the boy's hoodie, even the air inside, thick with the scent of sun-baked gravel and cooling engines. Afternoon light slanted through the grimy windows, casting elongated shadows across the oak table where the envelopes now lay splayed out, their crisp edges mocking the club's hard-won peace. Patch paced slowly, his boots scraping the floorboards with deliberate rhythm, each step a measured beat in the gathering storm. Theo hovered near the workbench, his small fingers tracing the seam of his backpack, the toolkit inside a silent sentinel against the unfolding tension. Jax limped to the table, depositing the clipboard with a thud that silenced the low murmurs. His face, etched with the ghosts of desert blasts, held a grim resolve as he slid one envelope toward Patch. "This ain't random, Prez. Seals were pride. Professional job. Ties back to those warehouse ghosts your brother chased." The words landed heavy, stirring the room like a revving engine in neutral. Big Earl loomed in the corner, his massive arms crossed, knuckles whitening as he stared at the cash stacks, the faint crinkle of paper under his gaze, evoking memories of raids gone sour, brothers lost to setups just like this. The air hummed with unspoken oaths. The club's emblem on the wall, a fist gripping a chain, seeming to tighten in the fading light. Theo's eyes darted between them, the boy's breath shallow, as if the envelopes breathed the same threat that had stolen his father. He stepped forward, voice steady despite the quiver in his stance. "Dad said they marked the crates with a scratch, like this." His finger pointed to a faint gouge on the envelope's edge, a deliberate nick hidden in the fold. The room leaned in, the scent of stale coffee and motor oil sharpening the focus. Patch examined it under the harsh bulb overhead, the light hollowing his cheeks, revealing the wear of promises unkept. His brother had vanished chasing similar marks, a trail of laundered funds that poisoned aid runs, turning charity into chains for the corrupt. "We can't ride blind," Patch said, his gravelly tone cutting the hush like a spark plug firing. He unrolled the map again, pinning it with the envelope, tracing lines from the warehouse to the city's underbelly, docks bleeding into high-rises where suits pulled strings from glass towers. "Theo, you remember anything else?" A face. "A name from your dad's stories?" The boy hesitated, the weight of eyes upon him pressing like the summer heat outside, where cicadas droned a relentless chorus against the tin roof. Memories flickered in Theo's gaze, nights by a flickering lantern, his father's hands black with grease, weaving tales of the iron oaths stand against the tide of greed. "One guy," Theo murmured, "tall, with a silver watch that ticked loud, called himself Harlan, said the club was obsolete, that oaths don't pay bills." The name rippled through the group like exhaust trailing a tailpipe. Jax's limp faltered as he straightened, recognition flashing in his scarred features. "Harlan Voss, developer scum, pushed my patrol partner's shop under eminent domain, fake papers, buried debts. Body never turned up after he fought back." Earl growled low, the sound vibrating through his chest, fists unclenching to reveal tattoos of fallen comrades, ink faded, but vows eternal. The clubhouse felt smaller, walls closing in with the press of history, the jukebox silent now, its neon glow pulsing like a heartbeat deferred. This wasn't just Theo's loss, it was theirs, a shared scar reopening, demanding the quiet justice of men who rode for the forgotten. Patch nodded, folding the map with finality, the paper whispering secrets. "We dig tonight. Quiet. No guns. Truth first." He turned to Theo, crouching to meet the boy's level, the president's shadow enveloping him like a protective wing. "You started this, kid. Your fix on that bike?" It was more than metal. "It's pulling us back to what we swore." Theo's dark eyes held steady, the faint smile from the morning ride returning, fragile but real. A bridge from street survival to something unbreakable. The boy nodded, clutching his wrench like a talisman, the cool metal grounding him amid the rising tide. As dusk bled into the sky outside, painting the lot in bruised purples, the club mobilized with hushed efficiency. Jax fired up an old laptop in the office, its fan whirring like a distant engine, pulling threads from shadowed networks, old contacts in the force, whispers from border runs. Earl and a few prospects slipped out on solo scouts, their Harleys purring low to avoid drawing eyes, the gravel crunching softly under tires. Theo stayed at Patch's side, handed a stack of photos salvaged from the club's archives, faded prints of rides and reunions, faces from chapters past. One caught his breath, a man with Theo's eyes, vest emblazoned with the iron fist, arm around a younger Patch, grins wide under desert suns. "Dad," Theo whispered, finger tracing the image, the paper crinkling under touch. Patch's hand rested on his shoulder, light as a vow. "He rode with us once, saved my hide in a dust storm, owed me nothing after, but brothers don't tally scores." The revelation hung, binding past to present, the scent of aged ink mingling with fresh resolve. Outside, stars pricked the velvet dark, the river's distant murmur a reminder of paths converging, but as midnight approached, a knock shattered the quiet, sharp, insistent. From the clubhouse door, Jax peered through the peephole, his body tensing like a coiled spring. "Cops!" he hissed, the word laced with old bitterness. Two uniforms stood under the floodlight, badges glinting like false promises, one clutching a clipboard that mirrored Theo's earlier task. Patch signaled silence, guiding Theo to the back room, the boy's heart pounding audible in the hush. "Stay low," Patch murmured, his voice an anchor. The door creaked open, authorities' chill seeping in, questions about unreported activity at the warehouse laced with veiled threats, eyes that lingered too long on the scattered envelopes. The interrogation stretched, tension coiling like a faulty timing belt, the cops' boots scuffing the floor, their scents of cheap cologne and patrol car vinyl clashing with the club's essence. Patch stonewalled with calm deflection, oaths unspoken shielding the truth. But doubt flickered. Were they clean or threads to Voss? As the badges departed, taillights fading into the night. The room exhaled, the air electric with peril. Jax locked the door, his limp echoing resolve. "They're watching. Means we're close." Theo emerged from shadows, face pale but eyes fierce, the photo clutched tight. This intrusion wasn't coincidence. It was the web tightening, Harlan's tick echoing in the silence. Patch gathered them, voice steady as sunrise. "We ride at dawn, for answers, for your dad, for all of us." The club murmured assent, fists raised in quiet salute, the iron oath reigniting. Outside, the wind whispered through the lot, carrying the promise of roads untraveled, justice not in vengeance, but in the unyielding stand of chosen kin. If this story is stirring something deep in you, hit that like button below. Your support fuels these rides through the shadows, keeping the light of redemption burning bright. The first blush of dawn crept over Dusthaven like a reluctant witness, painting the clubhouse lot in muted silvers and golds, the air crisp with the promise of dew-kissed roads. Engines hadn't yet stirred, but the iron oath was awake, shadows moving in the half-light as if the night itself refused to yield. Patch stood by the open door, his silhouette framed against the fading stars, a steaming mug of coffee in hand that carried the bitter aroma of resolve brewed strong. The cop's visit lingered like exhaust residue, questions too pointed, glances too probing, stirring the club's old wariness of badges that bent for the highest bidder. Theo huddled near the workbench, the faded photo of his father tucked into his hoodie pocket, its edges worn from nocturnal fingering, a talisman against the uncertainty gnawing at his edges. Jax emerged from the office, laptop screen's glow casting hollows under his eyes, the whir of its fan a low counterpoint to the distant crow of a rooster. "Threads confirmed," he said, voice hushed as he limped forward, handing Patch a printout of blurred images. Grainy shots from a contacts feed, showing a tall figure in a tailored coat emerging from a riverside office, silver watch catching the flash of a camera. Harlan Voss, unmistakable, his profile sharp as a switchblade, flanked by men whose postures screamed hired muscle. The paper rustled in Patch's grip, the ink fresh and accusing, tying the warehouse envelopes to a network of falsified deeds and diverted funds, all funneled through shells that starved the city's shelters. "He's the spider," Jax added, his shrapnel scars pulling tight. "Your brother's trail led here too, Prez. Theo's dad must have nicked the web." Theo's small frame tensed at the mention, his fingers absently polishing a wrench, the metal gleaming faintly in the dawn light filtering through the windows. The clubhouse smelled of last night's tension, stale coffee mingling with the faint metallic tang of fear sweat, and the boy felt it coil in his chest, a echo of nights alone, ears straining for the tick of that watch in the dark. Big Earl rumbled from the corner, cracking his knuckles with a sound like gravel shifting, his massive form a bulwark against the encroaching light. "We ride quiet," he growled, vest creaking as he hefted a duffel of tools and maps. "No blaze of glory, truth's our blade. Cut deep, leave 'em bleeding questions." The group nodded, a circle of weathered faces bound by ink and memory, the iron fist emblem on their backs, a silent oath against the corruption that had claimed too many. As the sun breached the horizon, engines coughed to life one by one, a symphony of throaty roars that vibrated through the lot, shaking loose pebbles and stirring dust devils in the cool air. Theo climbed onto Jax's bike again, the seat warm from the exhaust, his backpack strapped tight, the wrench in his pocket a weight of purpose. Patch led the convoy, his Harley a lead beast cutting through the morning mist that hung low over the streets. The scent of wet earth and blooming nightshade rising from cracked sidewalks. They wove out of Dust Haven, the city awakening in fits, delivery trucks rumbling, early workers glancing from doorways with wary eyes, the convoy a thunderous serpent slithering toward the riverfront, where Voss's operations festered like an untreated wound. The ride stretched, miles blurring into a rhythm of wind-whipped resolve, the river's briny breath growing stronger as they neared the industrial sprawl. Theo pressed against Jax's back, the vibration of the engine syncing with his heartbeat, memories surfacing unbidden. His father's voice over a sputtering motor. "Oaths ain't paper, son. They're the road you take when the world's gone crooked." The words anchored him as the convoy banked onto a rutted access road, gravel spitting under tires, leading to a cluster of low-slung buildings masked by overgrown weeds and faded "no trespassing" signs. Patch signaled a halt at the tree line, engines idling low, the group dismounting in a hush broken only by the lap of water against pilings and the distant clank of shipping cranes. They fanned out on foot, boots silent on the damp earth, the air thick with the rot of tidal mud and rusted iron. Jax and Theo took the flank, the boy's sharp eyes scanning for the telltale scratches, marks of sabotage his father had taught him to spot like a hunter's sign. A chain-link gate sagged ahead, padlock fresh but sloppy, and Jax's knife made quick work of it, the snick echoing softly. Inside, the compound sprawled, warehouses squatting like beasts, their doors ajar to reveal stacks of crates stamped with innocuous labels, aid supplies, community goods, that hid the rot within. Theo's breath caught as they slipped into the nearest, the dim interior lit by shafts of light piercing grimy skylights, dust motes dancing like ghosts. "Here," Theo whispered, pointing to a pallet in the shadows, his voice a thread in the gloom. The crates bore the gouges, deliberate nicks aligning with the envelope's edges, and Jax pried one open with careful leverage, revealing not medicine but ledgers, pages yellowed and crammed with figures that screamed embezzlement. Names jumped out, Voss at the top, trails leading to City Hall, funds siphoned from the very runs the Iron Oath protected. But deeper in, a folder caught Theo's eye. Photos, clipped reports, a face staring back that mirrored his own, labeled Quinn Asset Elimination. The boy's hand trembled as he touched it, the paper cool and damning, evidence of a setup that had torn his world apart, his father's debt a fabricated noose. Patch appeared at their side. his face a mask of controlled fury, the ledger clutched like a verdict. Voices drifted from an adjacent office, sharp, suited tones discussing loose ends with the cadence of conspiracy, and the group froze, hearts pounding in unison. Harlan's tick echoed faintly through the wall, a metronome of malice confirming the web's heart. No confrontation yet. They gathered what they could. Files, a hard drive humming with digital shadows, slipping out as silently as they'd come, the river's murmur covering their retreat. Back on the bikes, engines revving to life with restrained power, the convoy peeled away, the compound shrinking in the mirrors. A hornet's nest stirred but not smashed. The road home wound through midday haze, the sun climbing merciless, baking the revelations into their resolve. Theo rode taller now, the folder's weight in his pack a bridge to answers, the iron oath's loyalty wrapping around him like leather armor. Patch glanced back through the wind, seeing not just a boy, but a spark, reigniting old fires. The promise of justice not in destruction, but in exposing the lies that bound the innocent. Whispers of Voss's reach would spread, but so would their truth, a moral tide rising against the corruption's shore. The miles unspooled, carrying them toward confrontations that tested every oath, family forged in the crucible of shared scars, redemption riding shotgun on the endless blacktop. The midday sun beat down on the Iron Oath clubhouse like a relentless interrogator, turning the lot into a furnace of shimmering heat waves that distorted the rows of Harleys parked in precise formation. Dust from the return ride still swirled lazily in the air, settling on windshields and leather seats, carrying the faint, briny tang of the riverfront compound they'd infiltrated. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of cooling engines and fresh printed evidence. Ledgers and folders spread across the oak table like battlefield maps, their pages whispering accusations under the harsh glare of overhead bulbs. Patch stood at the head, his salt and pepper beard shadowed by the brim of his cap, fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the scarred wood, each tap echoing the tick of Harlan Voss's silver watch in Theo's memory. Theo sat on the edge of a stool, his small frame swallowed by the oversized hoodie now dusted with warehouse grime, the folder labeled Quinn, Asset Elimination, clutched in his lap like a forbidden relic. His dark eyes flicked over the photos inside, grainy shots of his father mid-ride, vest flapping in the wind. Then later ones of shadowed figures in suits, faces blurred but intentions sharp as shattered chrome. The boy's breath came in shallow pulls, the metallic scent of the hard drive Jax had salvaged, mingling with the knot of fear and fury twisting in his gut. This wasn't abstract anymore. It was his life, etched in ink and lies, a fabricated debt that had left him orphaned and adrift. Jax limped around the table, his shrapnel scars livid under the rolled-up sleeves of his flannel, plugging the drive into the laptop with a click that cut the room's tension like a snapped chain. The screen flickered to life, files unfolding in a cascade of digital shadows, emails time-stamped years back, transfers routing aid money to offshore shells, Voss's name stamped like a brand. "He's buried deep," Jax muttered, his voice gravel over the hum of the fan, scrolling through a thread that linked the warehouse sabotage to City Hall approvals, eminent domain grabs that crushed small shops and biker outposts alike. Big Earl hovered nearby, his massive arms crossed, the creak of leather punctuating his heavy breaths, eyes narrowing at a particular entry. A payout to internal assets, badges that explained the cop's midnight knock. Patch leaned in, the lines around his eyes deepening like cracks in sun-baked earth, his own ghosts rising with the revelations. His brother's disappearance, body never found, just a trail of falsified reports, mirrored Theo's loss, a parallel that bound the club tighter than any oath. "This ends it," he said, voice low and steady, the weight of command settling over the room like exhaust settling after a burnout. "No vigilante runs. We take this to the light, leaks to the press, allies in the force who still remember what honor means. Voss thinks oaths are obsolete? We'll show him unbreakable." The words hung, a vow renewed, stirring nods from the circle of weathered faces. Tattoos peeking from collars like badges of battles won and lost. But Theo shifted uneasily, the stool creaking under him, his fingers tracing the gouge on the folder's edge, a mark his father had taught him to fear, now a key to unlocking the cage. "They'll come for it," he said, voice barely above the laptop's whir, eyes lifting to meet Patch's. "Dad said Voss doesn't lose quiet. He'll send more than cops, guys who fix problems permanent." The admission cracked the air, a boy's hard-won wisdom clashing with the club's code of measured justice. Earl grunted, uncrossing his arms to place a calloused hand on Theo's shoulder, the gesture gentle for such a giant, grounding the kid amid the storm. "Then we stand, little man. Family don't scatter when shadows lengthen." As afternoon bled into evening, the clubhouse transformed into a war room of quiet determination, the scent of reheated stew from the hot plate mingling with the sharp tang of marker ink as Jack sketched connections on a whiteboard scavenged from the back. Prospects filtered in from scout runs, their reports low-voiced, increased patrols near the docks. A black SUV circling the warehouse district, Voss's web vibrating with awareness. Theo contributed in fragments, memories of his father's warnings, engine tricks to spot tampered rides, his small hands sketching diagrams on scrap paper, the pencil scratches a rhythmic counterpoint to the rising resolve. Patch watched him, seeing the spark of his own youth reflected back. The promise he'd made over a desert grave now extending to this stray who'd fixed more than a bike. Dusk fell heavy, the sky outside bruising to deep indigo, stars pricking through like distant signals of hope. The group paused for a meal around the table, plates clattering softly, the simple act a ritual of solidarity, steak charred on a grill out back, potatoes steaming with the earthy comfort of home. Theo ate slowly, the warmth seeping into his bones, the club's banter wrapping around him like a well-worn vest, Jax's dry jokes about desert mirages, Earl's booming laugh echoing off the walls. For the first time, the boy felt the edges of belonging, a chosen thread in the Iron Oath's tapestry, his losses not erased, but woven into something stronger, yet tension coiled beneath the surface, a faulty wire ready to spark. As night deepened, a low rumble approached from the lot. Not engines, but the growl of an unmarked van pulling up under the floodlights, tires crunching gravel with predatory slowness. Jax peered through the blinds, his limp forgotten in the surge, signaling the others to arms, wrenches and bats, no guns, true to their code. The door rattled with a heavy knock, voices muffled but urgent from outside. "Open up! We know what you took." Voss's men, shadows in dark coats, their postures screaming intimidation, silver glints of watches catching the light like mocking echoes. Patch rose, motioning Theo to the back room, the boy's heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "Stay put," Patch whispered, his hand firm on the kid's arm, eyes conveying the unspoken. This fight was for all of them. A stand against the corruption that devoured the vulnerable. The door creaked open, cool night air rushing in with the scent of impending rain. The standoff unfolding in the threshold's glow, questions barked, evidence demanded, the club's resolve, a wall of leather and loyalty. No blows yet, but the air crackled, ethical lines blurring under pressure, forcing choices that tested every bond. Theo pressed against the wall in the shadows, the folder hidden under the cot, listening to the voices clash like grinding gears. This was the precipice, the moral crux where promises faced the abyss, redemption hanging on the edge of dawn's uncertain light. Outside, thunder rumbled low, the storm gathering as the Iron Oath held the line, family forged in the fire of unyielding truth. The thunder rolled closer, a deep growl that mirrored the standoff at the clubhouse door, the night air thick with the ozone scent of approaching rain and the undercurrent of barely restrained fury. Patch stood firm in the threshold, his broad frame blocking the floodlight's glare, casting long shadows that danced across the gravel lot like wary spectres. The van's engine idled low, a menacing purr, its headlights slicing through the dark to illuminate the three figures in dark coats. Voss's enforcers, their faces hard lines etched by years of dirty work, silver watches glinting on wrists like badges of their master's greed. No weapons drawn yet, but the tension hummed, electric as a live wire, the air between them crackling with the weight of unspoken threats. "We got a tip," the lead man said, his voice smooth as oiled leather, stepping forward with a clipboard clutched like a shield, eyes scanning past Patch into the club's dim interior. "Unreported goods from the riverfront. Hand it over, and we walk quiet." Behind him the others shifted, postures coiled, the faint jingle of keys on their belts echoing the tick Theo had described, a sound that now set Patch's jaw tight, memories of his brothers vanishing, flooding back like a stalled engine, refusing to turn over. Inside, Jax gripped a heavy wrench at his side, his limp swallowed by the surge of protective instinct, while Big Earl loomed in the shadows, a mountain of resolve ready to shift. The clubhouse smelled of stew gone cold and ink from the scattered files, a sanctuary on the brink. Patch didn't budge, his gravelly voice cutting through the night like a revving throttle. "Tips from who? We run clean. Supplies for the shelters. Oaths we keep. You want truth? Start with your boss's ledgers." He held the lead's gaze, unblinking, the iron fist emblem on his vest catching the light, a symbol of bonds that no suit could sever. The man smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes, flicking a glance toward the van where shadows moved, perhaps a recorder or, worse, a call waiting to summon badges in their pocket. Rain began to patter on the tin roof. Soft at first, then insistent, drumming a rhythm that urged restraint amid the rising storm. From the back room, Theo pressed his ear to the wall, the cool plaster grounding him as voices clashed outside. The folder burned in his lap, its pages a map of his father's stolen life, fabricated debts, diverted funds, a trail of asset eliminations that explained the empty house and endless nights on the streets. His small hands clenched the wrench in his pocket, the metal's familiar weight, an echo of lessons from a man who taught him engines weren't just machines. They were promises, reliable when the world lied. He wanted to burst out, to shout the truths his father had whispered by lantern light. But Patch's warning held him. The club's way was justice, not chaos, loyalty over impulse. The standoff stretched, rain sheeting down now, turning the lot into a slick mirror reflecting the van's harsh beams. Jax stepped up beside Patch, his voice steady despite the old scars pulling. "We got proof, emails, files, your boy's name all over 'em, Voss, laundering aid through warehouses, framing clubs like ours. You walk now, or this hits every contact we got by morning." The lead man's smirk faltered, eyes narrowing as he absorbed the words, the clipboard lowering slightly. Inside the club, prospects had already mobilized quietly, Jax's laptop whirring as files uploaded to secure drops, allies in the press and honest cops alerted via encrypted lines. The web of corruption about to unravel not with fists, but with the unyielding light of exposure. Earl's low rumble broke the impasse from the doorway. "Family stands. Yours don't." The big man's words landed like a dropped anchor, stirring something in the lead enforcer, a flicker of doubt, perhaps a buried memory of oaths once held. Rain lashed harder, soaking coats and washing away pretenses, the van's wipers slapping futilely against the downpour. The man hesitated, exchanging glances with his partners, the tick of watches drowned by thunder. "This ain't over," he spat finally. But the edge was blunted, retreat in his stance as he backed toward the vehicle. Engines roared to life, tires spinning mud as they peeled away, taillights blurring into the storm, leaving only the echo of gravel and the scent of wet earth. The door shut with a solid thunk, the club exhaling as one, rain hammering the roof like applause for survival. Patch turned, water dripping from his beard, pulling Theo from the shadows with a firm hand. "It's done, kid. Not by force, by truth." The boy emerged, folder in hand, his face pale but eyes alight with a dawn all their own. Jax confirmed the uploads with a nod. The screen's glow illuminating ledgers, now destined for headlines. Voss's empire crumbling under scrutiny. Funds traced. Arrests looming without a shot fired. Harlan's tick would silence in a cell, his obsolete oaths exposed as the real fragility. As the storm eased to a drizzle, the group gathered around the table, the air lighter, scented with fresh coffee brewing anew. Theo placed the folder down, his father's photo slipping free, a grin under desert suns, now joined by new faces in the club's circle. Patch clapped his shoulder, the gesture sealing it. "Your iron oath now. Not by blood, but by choice. Your dad'd be proud." The boy nodded, a quiet smile breaking through, the weight of loss transforming into legacy. Redemption weaving through scars like reinforced chains. Dawn broke clear, sun piercing clouds to gild the lot. Engines firing up for a ride, not to chase shadows, but to deliver aid untainted. The convoy thundering out with Theo at the heart, wind whipping his hoodie like wings. The road stretched endless, carrying promises kept, a family chosen in loyalty's fire, justice won through honor's quiet roar. In Dust Haven's haze, the iron oath rolled on, unbreakable, a beacon for the lost. Thanks for riding along on this journey of oaths and redemption. If Theo's story moved you, hit subscribe and join the crew for more tales of chosen families and moral miles. Your support keeps the engines running.